To move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Ben Obbs-Ejecti to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered the benefits of free-to-air coverage of professional cycling. It is a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Dr Alan Khan, and I am grateful for the opportunity to open the debate. Growing up, many of us had a sporting hero, a star striker, a gold medal winner, a record-breaking athlete. My sporting hero was Jason McRoy. You've almost certainly never heard of Jason McRoy. He was arguably Britain's first mountain bike superstar. In the early 90s, when the sport was in its infancy, Jason was a trailblazer. And being the 90s, I followed his progress as closely as I could through the mediums available at the time. Mostly dog-eared copies of Mountain Biking UK that I lugged back and forth to school, reading each month's copy to destruction, and occasionally via coverage on Eurosport. Jason finally got his big break in 1993. As big companies started throwing money at the fledgling sport, the biggest race in the calendar, aside from the World Championships, was a one-off head-to-head downhill race on the famous Kamikaze course at Mammoth Mountain in California, the Reebok Eliminator. Having secured an entry after his mum persuaded the organisers, Jason, in his iconic black and white Hardest Die Cycles kit, a local bike shop in Newcastle, took on the top US factory race teams. Jason gave it his all, making it to the final against US favourite Miles Rockwell and narrowly losing, but he put his name on the sport's international map. A professional contract with Specialised USA followed the next season, and Britain had its first fully fledged superstar rider. We'll sadly never know how Jason's career would have panned out. On the 24th of August 1995, his Harley-Davidson collided with a lorry at Woodhead Pass on the A628 in Derbyshire. Jason's father Jim took the call announcing his death at 1:50 a.m. Without Jason, there may never have been a double Olympic gold medal and World Championship winning Tom Pidcock. Maybe no World Championship wins for G. Atherton, for Steve Peat, Danny Hart, Reece Wilson, Charlie Hatton, no Rachel Atherton, Tracy Mosley or Manon Carpenter. But these aren't household names. They're sporting successes, often difficult to witness as it is. Almost the only place to watch those races was on Eurosport, and last Friday, Eurosport was consigned to the history books. Eurosport's demise is a hammer blow for coverage of cycling in the UK. Owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, the inevitable demise of Eurosport was hidden in plain sight. First, GCN Plus, their cycling-specific app, was closed, citing a desire to offer more content on fewer platforms. GCN Plus provided almost unlimited access to the global cycling calendar. No race was too obscure. Omloop Het Nieuwsblad? Check. Scheldeprijs? Check. Kerner Brussels Kerner? Check. Cycling bores like me had never had it so good. Parallel to the slow demise of Eurosport, almost unnoticed to many outside of the cycling media bubble, Warner Brothers Discovery had also hoovered up the exclusive British broadcast rights to the Tour de France from 2026. Comfortably the blue ribbon event of the global cycling calendar, and possibly the only race that everybody has heard of. I will give way.
Madam Chair, can I commend Donald McDermott for bringing this forward? I spoke to him beforehand. And does the honourable member agree that the success of the Olympics, as an example, and he's very clearly illustrated that, is a national pride that comes from being able to access easy viewing and get the fervour and the excitement that he really showed that comes with actually watching your team perform, as opposed to reading results at the end of the day or in the papers the next day. The sport of cycling is worthy of our coverage and encouraging every child with a bike. After all, this could be your child or your grandchild.
I would wholeheartedly agree with the honourable member's sentiments, and I think that cycling is one of those sports that people almost fall into by accident. I mean, everybody had a bike growing up, everyone learns how to ride a bike, and I think the inspiration for riding that bike and potentially taking it further and wanting to ape some of the successes that we see in the Olympics every 4 years is something that comes apart from having that on TV in front of you. Now, when the move to the Tour de France to Warner Brothers Discovery was announced last October, it was described by The Guardian as a blow to free-to-air sport coverage. At the time, it was also to be shown exclusively on Eurosport, and as of Friday, even Eurosport itself no longer exists. Cycling coverage will now sit under the sporting umbrella of TNT Sports, also owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. The price of subscription to TNT Sports is £31 per month. Eurosport, when it wasn't included within an existing package, only cost £7 a month, a more than 400% increase to watch a sport that has limited crossover with other sports in TNT's portfolio. The Tour de France has been available free-to-air on British television for as long as I can remember. This summer, ITV4 will broadcast the race for the 25th successive and final time, and before that, Channel 4 had broadcast the race since I was a child. Indeed, I remember vividly the 1994 Tour de France when the race came to this country for the 4th and 5th stages of the race, the first time since an anticlimactic stage on the Plimpton bypass in 1973. I was enormously excited to get a glimpse of the great Miguel Indurain in his Benesto kit. It was also the Tour debut of Chris Boardman, who had worn the yellow jersey after winning the opening stage time trial. And such were the crowds and the reception that Boardman was quoted as saying, "I will never forget this day for as long as I live." ITV4 was the free-to-air stalwart. Having covered Le Tour for 25 years, coupled with Channel 4's coverage before that, the channel has been almost single-handedly responsible for inspiring a generation of young cyclists. Scott Young, Senior Vice President of Warner Brothers Discovery Sports Europe, has stated that providing free-to-air live cycling is not on our roadmap. People can choose to make their decision as to how they want to engage with us in the short term. That short term means a 400% price hike for paid coverage of professional cycling and the complete disappearance of live free-to-air coverage. Young has stated that there are no concerns within Warner Brothers Discovery that putting the sport behind a paywall will stunt the growth of the sport's support. But the European Broadcast Union's 2024 report, The Economic Impact of the Sports Activities of Public Service Media, clearly states that free-to-air coverage can also encourage participation in the sport at the grassroots level. For many, terrestrial coverage of the Tour de France has been their only entry point to a sport that is fundamentally extremely niche. The cycling calendar is awash with famous races, from the Grand Tours of the Giro d'Italia and La Vuelta to the classics such as Paris-Roubaix and Milan-San Remo. Iconic though these races are, they have failed to penetrate our national consciousness, despite British winners in recent years. The Tour de France is more than just a famous cycling race. It is a gateway to a sport that is otherwise comparatively inaccessible, now made even more so by the decision to remove live, free-to-air coverage from our television screens. I would.
Congratulate the honourable member for securing this debate, and I've had many of my local cycling clubs contact me to encourage me to contribute, and it's also an honour to serve under your chairmanship. Would you agree with me that it's such a great shame that if Great Britain is to become the host of the Great Depart in the 2027 Tour, the first time for over a decade, such an exciting event won't be available on free-to-air coverage, and that is a big blow for inspiring our young children to aspire to cycle professionally or for pleasure, but such a huge event won't be on free-to-air coverage, and that's a blow to the sport's future.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail later on, but I think you're absolutely right that it is a tragedy that at the same time as we've been awarded the Tour de France, the biggest race in the cycling calendar in 2027, at the same time, the easiest place to see that is going to be in person rather than being able to see it on television. Bradley Wiggins' Olympic gold medal inspired a generation, alongside his victory in the Tour de France that year, a British first. The following season, the torch passed to Chris Froome as he went on to win 4 times in the next 5 years. His run of victories was followed by Geraint Thomas, himself another multiple Olympic gold medalist. Between 2012 and 2019, 3 British riders won the Tour de France 6 times in 7 races. The following season, another British rider, Theo Gegenhardt, took the pink jersey, winning the general classification at the Giro d'Italia. Gegenhardt grew up watching the Tour de France on ITV. It is cited as one of the inspirations that brought him into the sport. Upon news of the Warner Brothers Discovery announcement, Gegenhardt publicly stated that the sport going behind such a large paywall is a huge problem, and that it is now time, perhaps, to question the monopoly held over the sport's UK coverage. But ITV is not blameless in this endeavour. Last year, ITV4 chose not to renew its broadcast rights, opening the door to Warner Brothers Discovery. The reassuring tones of Gary Imlach and the encyclopedic knowledge of Ned Boulting no longer to be a staple of cycling fans' summers. The organic growth in cycling that has accompanied this untrammelled success has been revolutionary, but the cycling boom that formed part of the London 2012 legacy is now in danger of being dropped by the peloton. The Tour de Yorkshire capitalised upon the success of the 2014 Grand Depart, but its demise saw it as another casualty of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2020 race was postponed by organiser ASO in March 2020, and after 2 years of attempted rearrangement, it has never returned, citing escalating financial challenges and uncertainties. The Tour of Britain, our very own multi-stage race, lacks the global recognition of the Tour de France, but last year's men's and women's races generated over £30 million to local economies in the towns and cities the race passed through. The future of that race is still uncertain, having been run last year by British Cycling after its former race organiser, Sweet Spot, had its race licence withdrawn after failing to pay the fee for it. Sweet Spot subsequently went into liquidation. Last year also saw the demise of our last 2 remaining continental tier teams, St Piran and Trinity Racing, both announcing their folding last autumn. As recently as 2021, the UK had 5 men's continental teams in Trinity Racing, St Piran, Ribble Weldtights, Canyon DHB SunGod and Swift Carbon Pro Cycling. None remain this season. We've also seen Ride London cancelled this year. The event was part of the London 2012 legacy, with its first iteration in 2013 and run every year since. The organisers' chief, Hugh Brasher, commented that over the past decade, the event had inspired more than 300,000 people to get back on a bike or cycle more, and has also raised more than £85 million for charity. These are phenomenal numbers for a cycling event. The strategic pause in 2025 raises concerns that it too may not return in 2026 or beyond. Even British Cycling's membership numbers have steadily dropped, having seen a five-fold increase from 30,000 to 150,000 over the decade between 2010 and the pandemic. Now those figures are steadily dropping. The last year has seen the demise of major British races, race organisers and domestic teams. Since 2008, the BBC Sports Personality of the Year has been won by a cyclist more times than any other sport. But last year's all but announced the end of British cycling's golden era, with Mark Cavendish's Lifetime Achievement Award following his incredible 11th hour achievement of eclipsing Eddie Merckx's Tour de France stage win record, and tributes to Bradley Wiggins and Chris Hoy following his diagnosis of terminal prostate cancer. In many ways, the demise of free live-to-air cycling is a metaphor for the crisis that has befallen professional cycling in the UK. I know that my own deeply mediocre recent career racing cyclocross was born from watching Matthew van der Poel take on Wout van Aert and latterly Tom Pidcock. Were it not for watching obscure Belgian super prestige races and finally deciding to get stuck in, I wouldn't have joined British Cycling, bought myself a bike from eBay, N+1, I don't make the rules, found my local grassroots race series and dragged myself off for an hour of the most hardest, most heart-pumping, and I mean that literally, men of my age aren't meant to hit 200 beats per minute, physical activity I've ever participated in. Matthew van der Poel, I was not, but it was fun to pretend I could be. I never would have taken up cyclocross if I hadn't had access to watching the sport. Cycling is so much more than just a sport. It has changed lives, saved lives, given people purpose, given people freedom. It is one of our greatest sporting success stories, but like all things, its success depends upon the next generation being willing to pick up the torch. To do that, children need to be inspired and parents need to be infused. Whilst the next generation of cyclists to emerge are already in the pipeline, there are limited options available to them domestically, and they will almost certainly now need to go abroad in order to take the next step in progressing their career. Cycling is not football, where you are never more than a stone's throw from a pub to watch the game in. We see mainstream sports all the time. Even just a glimpse on a news bulletin can be enough, but cycling rarely gets a look in. A British cyclist reaching the pinnacle of their sport and winning the coveted World Championships rainbow jersey barely registers in the world of sports coverage. A tennis player so much as gets a bye into the second round of a Grand Slam, and they carry the hopes of a nation. In an increasingly fractured media landscape, one where our national broadcaster struggles for relevance, linear TV finds itself staring into the abyss of obsolescence, and sports coverage is all but the preserve of those who can afford it. The inclusivity that sport offers appears to be at odds with the options available to consume it. Cycling is not a wealthy sport. The careers of professional cyclists are hard and precarious. Only those who achieve superstar status will make their fortune. For many, it is a journeyman sport, and for many more, it is too hard to sustain. To be popular, a sport must be visible. To be visible, a sport must have a television presence. The government would never allow the FIFA World Cup, the Olympic Games or Wimbledon to be put behind a paywall. With an estimated 12 million spectators attending the rates each year, the Tour de France is easily the most attended sporting event in the world. And I would ask the government to look at how it can inspire a new generation of Froomes and Cavendishes to take up the mantle and what it is doing to restore a sporting jewel, and one in which we have enjoyed such recent success to the masses. Less its absence from our sport causes the sport to wither on the vine. Not so long ago, Britain had a golden age of cycling that made us unassailably the best in the world. Olympics, World Championships, Tours de France, they were ours for the taking, and other countries could only look on in envy at the Union Jack-clad winning machine British cycling had become. Now, the slow puncture of managed decline has reached a point where even the visibility of the sport will be limited to slightly overweight middle-aged men like myself pootling around on a Sunday morning in their lycra, inspiring very few. I would ask the Minister what the government can do, and what the government is doing, to arrest that slide, to put British cycling, with a small c, on the right trajectory and stop the sport from fading into obscurity. What support can it give to the grassroots, and what help can it give to the struggling professional scene? What guarantees can it offer that the Tour of Britain and the World Championships across all disciplines won't disappear behind the TNT paywall as well? What will it do to use professional cycling as a catalyst and the inspiration to get the next generation out onto two wheels, matching its existing commitment to active travel schemes? But to finish, a shameless plug for my constituency of Huntingdon. If anybody from British Cycling happens to be watching this or reading it on Hansard, Huntingdon is a beautiful part of Cambridgeshire with endless rolling countryside that would look fantastic in the helicopter B-roll they use in the Tour de France. And with the race returning to the UK with the Grand Départ in 2027, we have a ring road that sets up perfectly for a spectacular sprint finish. But for many, that may present the best opportunity to actually see the race. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of free-to-air coverage of professional cycling. Minister.
Thank Well, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Dr Alan Khan. And I'd like to begin, of course, by congratulating the Honourable Member for Huntington on securing this important debate and his obvious commitment to cycling in all its forms. It was an incredibly interesting and thoughtful and at the very beginning very moving speech, so I congratulate him for bringing this debate today. Professional cycling is enjoyed by many across the United Kingdom. It captivates fans with its exciting races and inspires people across the country to get their bikes out every weekend, as he spoke about himself. It is also, it's also the sport of many remarkable athletes, and during one of my very first visits as the Minister of Sport, I was lucky enough to see the Olympians in action during the road race in Paris, and their speed and athleticism were fantastic to see. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Sir Mark Cavendish on his recent retirement, as the Honourable Member rightly acknowledged, and Geraint Thomas OBE on his up-and-coming plans to do so. Their long and illustrious careers demonstrate their dedication, and we will miss watching their excellence on the road. Now, I will cover the issues on broadcasting that the Honourable Member has raised today, and I'd like to discuss the need to balance revenue, growth and access, and I'd like to acknowledge right at the start that I do very much appreciate the points the Honourable Member has made. But before I move on to address those points, I'd like to start by highlighting the contribution that cycling makes to both our economy and, of course, people's health, well-being and enjoyment. Because it is important to acknowledge that the wider cycling industry has recently faced significant headwinds. Despite this, the industry is stabilising, with some retailers reporting positive financial performance, and there are several signs of potential growth in key high-demand areas such as road, gravel and electric mountain bikes. More broadly, in October last year, the DCMS published new research measuring the impact of the sport and physical activity sector on the economy based on 2021 data. That research showed that the sector directly and indirectly contributed £53.6 billion to the UK economy in 2021. This means that the sector was worth over 2.6% to the UK's economy. Among the sports that were assessed, cycling contributed the third most of all summer sports to the economy. This was across all three forms: off-road, road and track cycling, and these generated £5.4 billion to the UK economy in 2021. As a government, we will continue to encourage and support the growth of cycling and the rest of the sector into the future. This includes active support for professional cycling. And as part of the Los Angeles 2020 Olympic and Paralympic cycle, UK Sport have committed long-term investment over £38 million of its Chequer and National Lottery funding for British cycling. This is an uplift of under £1 million from the previous cycle, and it will go towards supporting all aspects of Great British Cycling Team, including equipment development and competition costs across road, track, mountain bike and BMX. And we know that is hugely important for inspiring the next generation, because of course you can't become a professional without proper opportunities for grassroots cycling. And I know the Honourable Member has been a passionate advocate for enhancing cycling infrastructure. I believe he's asked some questions in this place on that issue. And of course, on the 12th of February, the Department of Transport announced the details of almost £300 million of funding for local authorities for active travel in 24-25 and 25-26 to provide high quality and easily accessible active travel schemes across England. The funding will enable an additional 30 million journeys on foot and bike every year, with 53,000 people walking or cycling more regularly, including 15,000 children and young people. Investment in active travel helps revitalise high streets, improve air quality and support people to live longer, healthier lives. Though active travel is the responsibility of the Department of Transport, the DCMS is of course committed to working cross-government to ensure that everyone, including children and young people and those with disabilities, have access to and benefit from quality sport and physical activity opportunities. Indeed, Sport England provides long-term investment to British Cycling, the national governing body for cycling, which receives up to £26.6 million for 5 years to invest in community cycling initiatives. This funding allows British Cycling to invest in the sporting pathways. It supports the next generation of talented riders and volunteers, and it will help extend their work into England's diverse communities. The Government is also supportive of the UK hosting cycling events in line with our global reputation for hosting major events successfully. Now, when Scotland staged the UCI 2023 Cycling World Championships in Glasgow, 95% of Scottish residents said they were proud to see their region host the event. Visit Scotland also reported a boom in interest in cycling across Scotland, in part due to those championships. And our 2024 manifesto committed to delivering international events with pride, as well as seeking new opportunities where we can to create a legacy to inspire the next generation of talent, promoting exercise and healthy living and creating safe and cohesive communities. Given the variety and formats and events in professional cycling, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with the sport through physical attendance alone. So it's unsurprising that so many people enjoy TV coverage. And I sympathise with the points the Honourable Member has made about the cost of TV packages, not least following the decision to integrate Eurosport, the long-time broadcaster of professional cycling, into TNT Sports. That will mean that many will see their subscription to watch cycling alongside other sports go up to over £30, as he said. And he's absolutely right, for many, £30 a month is a lot of money. And I'm sure TNT Sports will be thinking about the balance between generating revenue and ensuring that cycling continues to be seen regularly on TV, helping to grow the sport. However, as the Minister for Sport, I also appreciate the importance of TV revenues in sustaining these sports and recognise that commercial matters need to be considered carefully by making those decisions. And I'm sure the Honourable Member would agree it's not for government to intervene in such decisions. On the point the Honourable Member has made on the Tour de France being on free-to-air television, I recognise that many will have taken great pleasure for watching it in the last 25 years on ITV, and it is a matter for the broadcaster with the Tour de France rights to determine whether any coverage will be available to free-to-air in the future. Any discussions wouldn't be a matter for the government. Now, I am aware of the speculation around the Tour de France taking place in the UK in 2027. We have in the past made no secret of our ambition to host the Grand Depart here again, following the success of the 2014 event in Yorkshire, in the hope of inspiring more people to enjoy cycling and bring lasting benefits to our communities. However, nothing has been decided, and this is a matter for the organisers. So, in closing this debate, it has offered a fantastic opportunity to discuss the continued success of professional cycling, indeed cycling across the UK. It is a sport that we want to see continue to grow in this country for the economic value it has, for the sporting heroes he so passionately spoke about, it generates, and for the inspiration it provides to many. And I once again like to thank those who contributed, and indeed to the Honourable Member for bringing it today.
The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of free-to-air coverage of professional cycling. As many as are of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 this afternoon.